People are often warned to be careful what they wish for, but rarely are they warned to be careful what they joke about. In the winter of 1819, Lady Isolde Carrington stood in a crowded ballroom, facing financial ruin and a forced marriage to a man she loathed. With a glass of champagne in a trembling hand, she laughed and whispered 7 words that would shatter her world. "I'll marry the first man who enters." She expected a servant. She expected a ghost. Instead, the heavy oak doors swung open, and in walked the most dangerous man in England, and he had heard every word. The rain battered against the high, leaded windows of Wingham Hall like handfuls of gravel thrown by an angry god. It was October 14th, 1819, a date Lady Isolde Carrington would remember not for the storm outside, but for the hurricane she was about to invite into her life. Inside the library, the air smelled of beeswax, old paper, and desperation. "You cannot be serious, Papa," Isolde whispered, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the mahogany desk. "Lord Vane? He is 3 times my age. He has buried 2 wives. The rumors about the second one?" "Rumors are not currency, Isolde." The Viscount of Oakhaven slammed his hand down, rattling the inkwell. "Debts are currency, and I have none left. Vane holds the deed to Oakhaven. He wants a young wife with a good pedigree. You are 23. You are practically on the shelf. This is not a request. It is a salvage operation." Isolde stared at her father. The man who used to read her poetry was gone, replaced by a hollow shell consumed by the gaming tables at White's. She felt the walls of the library closing in. Lord Henry Vane was a toad of a man, damp hands, shifting eyes, and a reputation for cruelty that was whispered about in the corners of Almack's. "I will not do it," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I would rather scrub floors." "You will do it, or you will see your mother and sisters on the street by Christmas." Isolde turned on her heel and fled the room, the heavy silk of her emerald gown swishing violently. She didn't head for the ballroom, where the country dance was in full swing. She ducked into the small, dimly lit anteroom near the servants' entrance, desperate for air. Her childhood friend, Beatrice Danvers, found her there moments later, pacing the Persian rug like a caged tigress. "Izzy, what is it? You look as though you've seen a murder." "A murder would be preferable," Isolde hissed, pouring herself a glass of sherry from the sideboard, ignoring all propriety. "My father intends to sell me to Lord Vane to clear his debts." Beatrice gasped, covering her mouth with a gloved hand. "Vane? The man with the teeth? Izzy, you can't." "I have no choice, Bea, unless a miracle walks through that door." Isolde gestured wildly toward the heavy oak door leading to the stormy courtyard. She took a large gulp of sherry, the liquid courage burning her throat. A bitter, manic laugh bubbled up in her chest. "You know what?" Isolde declared, her voice rising with hysteria. "I am done with calculations. I am done with good matches. Fate wants to play a game? Fine." She raised her glass to the ceiling. "I swear to you, Beatrice, I will marry the first man who enters that door. I don't care if it's the stable boy, the vicar, or a highwayman. Anyone is better than Vane." "Izzy, hush!" Beatrice hissed, checking the hallway. "Don't tempt Providence." "I mean it," Isolde shouted, tears finally spilling over. "The very first man! Let him come!" Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the stained glass above the door, followed instantly by a crack of thunder that shook the floorboards. The heavy iron handle of the door turned. Both women froze. The latch clicked.
The door groaned open, pushed by a gust of wind and rain that sent a chill sweeping through the warm room. A man stepped inside. He was massive, filling the frame of the door. He was drenched, his heavy, many-caped greatcoat shedding water onto the floorboards. He wore high riding boots splattered with fresh mud. He removed his dripping hat, revealing hair as black as the midnight sky, plastered to his forehead. He wasn't a stable boy, and he certainly wasn't a vicar. It was Sebastian St. Clair, the Duke of Harrogate. The room went deathly silent. Beatrice let out a small squeak of terror. Every eligible woman in London knew of Harrogate. He was the Duke of Devils, reclusive, incredibly wealthy, and scarred. A jagged, pale line ran from his left temple down to his cheekbone, a souvenir, they said, from a duel in Vienna, where he killed a man for looking at him wrong. He never attended balls, he never danced, and he was staring directly at Isolde. His eyes were a piercing, cold gray, like the North Sea in winter. He looked from the terrified Beatrice to the defiant, tear-stained Isolde. He took a slow step forward, the sound of his boots heavy on the wood. "I trust," his voice was a deep baritone, rough like gravel, "that the lady is a woman of her word." Isolde stopped breathing. He had heard. "Your Grace," Beatrice stammered, dropping into a clumsy curtsy. It was a jest, a silly game." "I did not hear laughter," Sebastian said, never breaking eye contact with Isolde. He walked closer, bringing with him the scent of rain, leather, and horses. He stopped 2 feet from her, towering over her. "You are Isolde Carrington, daughter of Viscount Oakhaven." It wasn't a question. "I am," Isolde managed to whisper. Her heart hammered
against her ribs like a trapped bird. "And you are wet, Your Grace." A flicker of something, amusement, crossed his stoic face. "Indeed, my carriage lost a wheel a mile back. I walked." He tilted his head. "I stood outside the door for a moment, seeking shelter from the wind. The wood is thin. Your declaration was spirited." He pulled off his wet gloves, slapping them into his palm. "Lord Vane is a pig," the Duke said flatly. "His debts are significant, and his health is failing, though not fast enough for his creditors." Isolde blinked. "How do you know?" "I make it my business to know the value of things, and people." He stepped closer, invading her personal space. The air crackled with a sudden, terrifying tension. "You need a way out. I need a wife, tonight." Isolde's glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the rug. "Tonight?" "I am a busy man, Lady Isolde. I do not have time for courtship, fans, and quadrilles. I require a duchess. You require protection from a predator. I am offering you a trade." He extended a hand. It was large, scarred, and steady. "Marry me, now. We can wake the vicar. I will settle your father's debts by morning, and Vane will never look in your direction again." "And what do you get?" Isolde asked, her voice shaking. "Why me? Why now?" The Duke's face hardened, the scar pulling tight. "That is the one question you must never ask me." Isolde looked at the door leading back to her father and the impending doom of Lord Vane. Then she looked at the dark, imposing stranger offering her a lifeline wrapped in mystery. She took a breath that felt like inhaling broken glass. "All right," she whispered, placing her hand in his. "I accept." The wedding was a blur of candlelight and cold drafts. They found the local vicar, Reverend Thomas Miller, asleep in the rectory.
He was roused by the Duke's groom and brought to the small chapel on the estate grounds, bleary-eyed and trembling as he recognized the Duke of Harrogate. There were no flowers, there was no music. Beatrice stood as the witness, weeping silently into her handkerchief, terrified she was watching her friend sign a pact with Lucifer himself. Isolde wore her emerald ball gown, now slightly damp from the dash to the chapel. Sebastian had shed his greatcoat, but remained in his riding clothes, the mud drying on his boots. "Do you, Sebastian Arthur St. Clair, take this woman?" Isolde looked up at him. In the flickering candlelight, he looked less like a man and more like a statue hewn from granite. He didn't look at her, he looked at the altar, his jaw set. "I do," he said. The words sounded like a sentence being passed. When the ring was slid onto her finger, it was heavy, a thick band of gold with the
St. Clair crest, a roaring lion pressed into it. It was too big, it spun loosely on her finger. "I pronounce you man and wife." It was done. In the span of an hour, Isolde Carrington had become the Duchess of Harrogate, one of the highest-ranking women in England, and she didn't even know her husband's favorite color. The ride to London was excruciating. Sebastian had practically thrown her father a bank draft that made the Viscount faint with relief, then ushered Isolde into a fresh carriage he had summoned from a nearby inn. They traveled through the night. For 4 hours, he said nothing. He sat opposite her, reading documents by the light of a carriage lantern, his long legs stretched out. Isolde watched him, trying to analyze the stranger she had married. He was handsome, undeniably so, in a brutal, rugged way, but there was a coldness to him that frightened her. "Why?" She finally broke the silence. The carriage rattled over the cobblestones as they entered the outskirts of London. He didn't look up from his papers. "I told you not to ask that." "I am your wife, Sebastian. I think I deserve to know why you needed a bride so urgently that you picked a desperate woman in a library." He slowly lowered the paper, his gray eyes locked onto hers. "Because, madam," he said softly, "if I was not married by midnight tonight, my inheritance, specifically the Blackwood estate and the guardianship of my nephew, would have passed to my cousin. My cousin is a man who makes Lord Vane look like a saint. I needed a body. You needed money. We are satisfied." Isolde felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. A business transaction, that was all she was, a placeholder to secure a legacy. "I see," she said, lifting her chin. "So I am a piece of paper to you, a deed." "You are a duchess," he corrected. "You will have clothes, jewels, a household, and freedom. All I ask is that you play the part in public and leave me alone in private." The carriage lurched to a halt in front of Harrogate House in Grosvenor Square. It was a massive, imposing structure of black stone, dark save for a single light in an upper window. "Welcome home," he said, void of any warmth. He helped her down, his grip firm but impersonal. The servants were lined up in the hall, looking shocked to see their master return at 3 a.m. with a woman in a ball gown. "This is her grace," Sebastian announced to the butler, a severe man named Mr. Barrow. "Prepare the gold suite for her." "The gold suite, your grace?" Barrow's eyebrows shot up. "And for you?" "I will be in my study. Do not disturb me." Sebastian turned to Isolde. He looked at her for a long moment, and for a split second, Isolde thought she saw hesitation in his eyes, a flicker of regret, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Good night, Isolde," he said. He turned and walked into the darkness of the hallway, leaving her standing alone in the grand foyer of her new prison.
Isolde didn't sleep that night. She lay in the massive four-poster bed in the gold suite, listening to the wind howl. She had escaped a monster, yes, but she was beginning to realize she might have married a ghost. The next morning, the drama truly began. Isolde descended the grand staircase at 9 a.m., dressed in a day dress she had borrowed from her own trunk. Thankfully, Beatrice had packed a bag for her before they left. The house was silent. Too silent. She found the dining room empty. A single place setting was laid out. "Where is the Duke?" she asked the footman who poured her tea. "His Grace left at dawn, Your Grace." "Left? Left for where?" "He did not say, my lady, but he took his travel trunks." Isolde sat frozen, the china cup rattling in its saucer. He had married her, brought her here, and abandoned her within 6 hours? Just then, the heavy double doors of the dining room swung open. But it wasn't Sebastian. An older woman wheeled herself in. She sat in an intricate mahogany wheelchair, her lap covered by a heavy tartan blanket. Her hair was white as snow, pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes were the exact same shade of icy grey as Sebastian's. This was the Dowager Duchess, Rowena St. Clair, Sebastian's aunt. She stopped the chair at the end of the table and stared at Isolde with a look that could curdle milk. "So," the Dowager rasped, her voice like dry leaves, "you are the little stray my nephew dragged in from the storm." Isolde stood up, summoning every ounce of dignity she possessed. "I am Isolde, the Duchess of Harrogate, and I am hardly a stray." Rowena let out a sharp, barking laugh. "Duchess, you are a pawn girl, a pawn in a game you don't even know you're playing. Did he tell you about the curse?" Isolde's blood ran cold. "The curse? The St. Clair men do not love," Rowena hissed, rolling her chair closer. "And the women they marry, they do not last. The first wife died of a broken neck. The fiancé before her vanished. Sebastian isn't just cold, child. He is haunted. And if you are not careful," she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper, "you will find out what is really locked in the West Wing." Isolde stared at the woman, her heart pounding. "What is in the West Wing?" Rowena smiled, a thin, cruel expression. "Go and see, but don't say I didn't warn you." As the Dowager wheeled herself out, cackling.
Softly, Isolde realized her joke had landed her in a gothic nightmare. But Isolde Carrington was not a woman who hid under the covers. She finished her tea, she stood up, and she walked toward the West Wing. The West Wing of Harrogate House was not merely closed off, it was entombed. Isolde stood before the heavy double doors at the end of the long gallery. While the rest of the house was kept in pristine, if somewhat gloomy, condition by the staff, dust motes danced in the shafts of light here. The air was colder, stagnant, smelling of lavender and decay. "I wouldn't go in there, Your Grace." Isolde jumped, her hand flying to her chest. It was Barrow, the butler. He had appeared silently, like a phantom. "Barrow?" Isolde breathed, steadying herself. "The Dowager Duchess mentioned something about this wing. She said there were things I should know." Barrow's face remained impassive, a mask of professional detachment. "The Dowager enjoys her stories, Your Grace. The West Wing is simply structurally unsound. Old floorboards, dry rot. The Duke has forbidden entry for safety reasons." "Is that so?" Isolde narrowed her eyes. She had grown up in Oakhaven, a house held together by hope and plaster. She knew the smell of dry rot.
This hallway didn't smell like rot, it smelled like secrets. Then why do I hear footsteps? Barrow paused. For the first time, his gaze flickered toward the doors. Rats, Your Grace. Big London rats. I am going in, Barrow. I cannot permit. I am the Duchess of Harrogate, Isolde stated, her voice ringing clear and authoritative, summoning a courage she didn't quite feel. I outrank you, Barrow. Step aside, or shall I write to my husband and tell him his staff is holding his wife prisoner? It was a bluff. She barely knew her husband, but it worked. Barrow stiffened, then slowly bowed. As you wish, Your Grace, but please do not open the third door on the left. He turned and walked away, his stiff posture betraying his anxiety. Isolde pushed open the main doors. The hinges screamed in protest. The hallway beyond was shrouded in twilight, the curtains drawn tight. Furniture was draped in white sheets like ghosts standing in judgment. She walked slowly, the floorboards creaking under her slippers. First door, empty guest room. Second door, a linen closet. She reached the third door on the left. It was heavy oak, reinforced with iron bands, and unlike the others, it had a heavy, shiny new padlock on the outside. Isolde pressed her ear to the wood. Silence. Then a soft, rhythmic scratching, like an animal trapped in a crate. "Hello?" she whispered. The scratching stopped. A low whimper came from the other side. It was a sound so full of misery it broke her heart instantly. Isolde looked around. She needed a key. She checked the top of the doorframe. Nothing.
She checked under the rug. Nothing. Then she remembered the hairpin in her chignon. It was a trick Beatrice had taught her when they were 12 and wanted to break into the pantry for lemon tarts. It took 5 agonizing minutes of twisting and scraping, her hands shaking, sweat prickling her forehead. Finally, with a satisfying click, the padlock sprang open. Isolde removed the lock, turned the handle, and pushed the door open. The room was a nursery, but it was a nursery that looked like a war zone. Toys were smashed against the walls. The curtains were shredded. In the center of the room, amidst a pile of torn pillows and blankets, curled into a tight ball, was a child. It was a boy, perhaps 6 or 7 years old. He had wild, matted black hair and was wearing a nightshirt that was stained and too small. He looked up as the light hit him, and Isolde gasped. He had Sebastian's gray eyes. "Who are you?" Isolde whispered, stepping into the room. The boy scrambled backward, grabbing a wooden block as a weapon. He didn't speak. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out, only a raspy, dry heave of air. He is mute, she realized. "It's all right," Isolde said softly, sinking to her knees to make herself smaller. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Isolde." The boy watched her, trembling violently. He looked starved, not for food. There was a tray of untouched bread and cheese nearby, but for kindness. "Are you Leo?" she asked, guessing the name of the nephew Sebastian had mentioned. The boy blinked. He lowered the block slightly. "I'm your—" She hesitated. "I'm your aunt. Your Uncle Sebastian married me." At the mention of Sebastian's name, the boy's face crumbled. He dropped the block and buried his face in his knees, rocking back and forth. Isolde didn't think. She moved forward and wrapped her arms around the filthy, trembling child. He stiffened, terrified, but then slowly he collapsed into her, clutching the silk of her dress with desperate strength. He cried silently, his small body shaking with sobs that had no voice. "Oh, you poor darling," she soothed, stroking his matted hair. "Who put you in here? Why are you locked up?" "Because he is dangerous, Your Grace."
Isolde spun around, still holding the boy. Standing in the doorway was a tall, severe-looking woman in a nurse's uniform. She held a ring of keys. "I am Mrs. Gables," the woman said coldly, "and Master Leo bites. You should release him before he draws blood." "He is a child," Isolde snapped, her temper flaring hotter than it ever had at her father. "Not a dog. Why is he locked in?" "The Duke's orders," Mrs. Gables said. "The boy is afflicted. He saw his parents die in the fire at Blackwood. He hasn't spoken since. He has fits
of rage. He destroys everything. The Duke keeps him here for his own safety and to keep him hidden from Lord Silas." Isolde looked down at the boy, who was now clinging to her as if she were a life raft. She saw no rage, she saw only terror. "Well," Isolde said, standing up and lifting the surprisingly light boy into her arms. He buried his face in her neck. "The orders have changed." Mrs. Gables stepped forward to block the exit. "You cannot take him. The Duke will be furious." "Let him be furious," Isolde declared, her eyes flashing. "If my husband wants to lock up his own flesh and blood like a criminal, he can come and tell me himself. Until then, Leo stays with me." She marched past the stunned nurse, carrying the heir to the St. Clair fortune out of the darkness and into the light. 3 weeks passed. The rain in London had turned to a biting frost, but inside Harrogate House, a thaw had begun. Isolde had taken over. With Sebastian gone and no word of his return, she had ceased being a guest in her own home. She moved Leo into the room adjacent to hers, the blue room, which was sunny and cheerful. She fired Mrs. Gables the same afternoon she found Leo, replacing her with a kind-faced young maid named Martha, who knew how to tell fairy tales. Leo was still mute, but the rage was fading. He followed Isolde everywhere, a silent shadow. She played piano for him, and he would sit under the instrument, feeling the vibrations. She had also started spending the Duke's money. The gloomy velvet drapes were replaced with lighter silks. Fresh flowers, white lilies, and hothouse roses filled every vase. The house smelled of wax and life rather than dust and secrets. Even Barrow, the stiff butler, had been seen smiling when Leo managed to build a house of cards in the drawing room. Then the storm returned. It was a Tuesday evening. Isolde was in the library, reading Ivanhoe aloud to Leo, who was sketching by the fire. The front doors slammed open with such force that the crystal chandelier jingled. Heavy boots thundered across the marble floor. "Barrow!" a voice roared. It was a sound that made the very foundations of the house shake. Leo dropped his charcoal, his eyes going wide with panic. He scrambled behind the sofa. "It's all right," Isolde whispered, her own heart hammering. "Stay there, Leo." She stood up, smoothing her skirts, and walked into the hallway. Sebastian St. Clair stood in the foyer. He looked exhausted. His riding clothes were travel-stained, his black hair windswept, and the scar on his face stood out starkly against his pale skin. He saw the flowers. He saw the new drapes. He saw the light. And then he saw Isolde. "What," he growled, stepping toward her, "have you done to my house?" "I made it livable," Isolde said, clasping her hands in front of her to hide their trembling. "Welcome home, Sebastian. You might have written." He ignored the pleasantry. He stalked toward her, radiating a dangerous energy. "Where is Mrs. Gables? I received a letter from her saying she was dismissed without cause." "There was cause. She was a jailer, not a nurse." "She was keeping him safe," Sebastian shouted. The echo bounced off the vaulted ceiling.
Do you have any idea what you have done? If Silas finds out the boy is loose, the boy is not a rabid animal, Sebastian. He is your nephew. He is uncontrollable. He is a lonely child, Isolde yelled back, matching his volume. And he is right here. She pointed to the library door. Sebastian froze. He looked past her and saw Leo peeking out from behind the doorframe, trembling. Sebastian's expression shattered. For a moment he looked horrified. "Leo," he breathed. Leo shrank back. Sebastian turned on Isolde, gripping her upper arm and dragging her further down the hall, away from the boy. His grip was tight, but not painful, desperate. "You have no idea what you are playing with," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "My cousin Silas claims Leo is insane. He wants to have him committed to Bedlam so he can challenge the inheritance. If he sees the boy having a meltdown, if he sees him wild, he wins. I locked him away to hide his condition until I could find a cure." "Locking him away is the condition." Isolde wrenched her arm free. "He was wild because he was alone in the dark. Look at him now." She gestured to the boy. Leo had stepped fully into the hall. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't breaking things. He was watching Sebastian with wide, curious eyes. Sebastian looked at the boy, then back at his wife. He looked thoroughly defeated. "I was trying to protect him." "You were burying him," Isolde said softly, "just like you bury yourself." Sebastian stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. The anger slowly drained out of him, leaving only exhaustion. He ran a hand over his face. "I need a drink," he muttered. He walked into the library. Isolde signaled for Martha to take Leo upstairs. Then she followed her husband. She found him pouring a large brandy. He drank it in one swallow and poured another. "I have spent the last 3 weeks in Yorkshire," he said, his back to her, "fighting lawyers, paying off bribes, ensuring your father doesn't gamble away the settlement I gave him. I come home to find you have turned my fortress into a flower shop." "A home," she corrected. "I turned it into a home." He turned around, leaning against the
desk. The firelight cast shadows across his scarred face. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since their wedding. He saw the determination in her jaw, the intelligence in her eyes. He realized suddenly that he hadn't just bought a bride, he had married an equal. "You are a troublesome woman, Isolde," he said, but the bite was gone from his voice. "And you are a foolish man, Sebastian." She walked over to the desk and poured herself a small glass of sherry. "You think you can save everyone by being a monster. It doesn't work." He let out a short, dry laugh. "I am a monster. Ask London." "I don't care about London. I care about what happens in this house." She took a sip. "Dinner is at 8. I expect you to be there, and I expect you to be kind to Leo. If you shout at him again, I will lock you in the West Wing." Sebastian looked stunned. Then the corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was close. "You would, wouldn't you? Try me." She finished her sherry, set the glass down, and walked out of the room. Sebastian watched her go. He touched the scar on his face, a habit he had when he was unsettled. He had married her to save his estate. He hadn't expected her to try and save him. That night, dinner was a tense affair. Sebastian sat at the head of the table, Isolde at the foot, and Leo between them. The silence was heavy. Sebastian struggled to look at the boy. He saw too much of his dead brother, Arthur, in the boy's face. The guilt clawed at his throat. "Isolde tells me you like to draw," Sebastian said stiffly.
his voice too loud in the quiet room. Leo froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. "He does," Isolde interjected smoothly. "He drew the garden today. Show him, Leo." Leo hesitated. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. He slid it across the mahogany table. Sebastian picked it up. It was a crude charcoal sketch of the garden fountain, but next to the fountain, Leo had drawn two figures, a woman with long hair and a tall, dark figure standing guard. Sebastian stared at the drawing. His throat worked. "It is good," he rasped. "Very good." He looked up, and his eyes met Isolde's. There was a raw vulnerability there that took her breath away. For the first time, the Duke of Devils looked human. But the piece was fragile. As the clock struck 10, the heavy knocker on the front door slammed. Barrow entered the dining room a moment later, looking pale. "Your Grace," he said, bowing to Sebastian, "Lord Silas is here, and he has brought Dr. Arbuthnot from the Royal College of Physicians."
Sebastian stood up so fast his chair fell backward with a crash. His face went white, then hard as stone. "Take the boy upstairs," he commanded Isolde. "Now." "Sebastian!" "Go!" he roared. "Hide him!" Isolde grabbed Leo's hand and ran. As she reached the top of the stairs, she looked back. She saw the front doors open. A man walked in who looked like a golden, polished version of Sebastian. He was handsome, smiling, and utterly terrifying. "Cousin!" Silas called out, his voice dripping with false affection. "I heard you were back. I've come to check on the welfare of my dear nephew. I hear disturbing rumors." Isolde pulled Leo into the shadows, her heart racing. The war had arrived. The foyer of Harrogate House felt like a chessboard where every move could be fatal. Lord Silas St. Clair was a golden man, blonde hair perfectly coiffed, a smile that showed too many teeth, and attire that was the height of fashion. Beside him stood Dr. Arbuthnot, a rotund man clutching a medical bag, looking uncomfortable to be caught in a family dispute. Sebastian stood at the base of the stairs, his arms crossed, a human barricade. "You have no authority here, Silas," Sebastian growled. "Get out before I have Barrow throw you out." "I have every authority," Silas countered smoothly, pulling a document from his coat. "A petition to the Chancery. Concerns have been raised regarding the heir's mental state. Rumors of violence, confinement. Dr. Arbuthnot is here to assess if the boy is fit to remain in your custody or if he requires the professional care of Bedlam." "He is a child," Sebastian roared, stepping forward. "He is grieving." "He is a danger," Silas snapped, his mask slipping. "He bit a maid. He screams at walls. He is broken, Sebastian, just like his father was, and you are unfit to guard him." "If you take one step toward those stairs," Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register, "it will be the last step you take on functional legs." The air was thick with violence. Dr. Arbuthnot took a nervous step back. "Gentlemen, please," the doctor stammered. "Your Grace, if the boy is well, a simple examination will clear this up." "He is sleeping," Sebastian lied. "I am awake." The voice was soft, feminine, and steady. Everyone looked up. Isolde stood at the top of the stairs. She had not hidden Leo. She had not run. She held Leo's hand. The boy was dressed in a clean velvet suit, his hair brushed smooth. He looked small and pale, but he was not trembling. He was looking down at the men with wide, solemn eyes.
Isolde, Sebastian breathed, panic flashing in his eyes. Go back. Nonsense, Isolde said, descending the stairs with the grace of a queen. We have guests. Leo, say hello to your cousin. Leo didn't speak, but he offered a polite, stiff bow, just as Isolde had practiced with him for hours in the nursery, treating it like a game. Silas narrowed his eyes. He doesn't speak, a sign of idiocy. He is mute, Lord Silas, Isolde corrected, reaching the bottom floor. She placed a protective hand on Leo's shoulder. Trauma often steals a voice. It does not steal a mind. But please, Dr. Arbuthnot, come into the drawing room. Leo was just helping me choose the music for the evening. She swept past a stunned Sebastian, leading the enemy right into the heart of the house. In the drawing room, Isolde orchestrated a performance of calm domesticity that would have won awards on a London stage. She ordered tea. She had Leo sit beside her. Dr. Arbuthnot, Isolde said, pouring tea. Leo, would you pass the doctor the sugar? The room went silent. Sebastian stood by the fireplace, his knuckles white as he gripped the mantelpiece. If Leo threw the bowl, if he screamed. Leo reached out. His small hand shook slightly. He picked up the silver sugar bowl. He held it out to the doctor. Thank you, young man, Arbuthnot said, taking a cube. Leo set the bowl down without a sound. He draws, you know, Isolde continued, picking up the charcoal sketch Leo had done of the garden. Dr. Arbuthnot, you are a man of science. Does this look like the work of a madman? She handed him the drawing. The doctor adjusted his spectacles. He looked at the perspective, the shading. Remarkable, Arbuthnot muttered. The attention to detail. This is quite advanced for a child of 7. He is a sensitive soul, Isolde said firmly. He needs quiet. He needs love. He does not need bedlam. Arbuthnot nodded slowly. He turned to Silas. My lord, I see no evidence of hysteria here. The boy is quiet, yes, withdrawn, but he seems perfectly docile. Silas's face turned a shade of red that clashed with his cravat. He glared at Leo. Leo, emboldened by Isolde's presence, stared back. He is acting, Silas hissed. This is a trick. The only trick here, Silas, Sebastian spoke up, pushing off the mantelpiece, is your attempt to steal my nephew's inheritance. Now get out. Dr. Arbuthnot stood up. I must agree with the Duke. I see no grounds for removal. Good evening, Your Grace. My apologies for the intrusion. The doctor bowed and exited. Silas lingered. He walked up to Isolde, ignoring Sebastian. He looked at her with a cold, predatory appreciation. You are clever, Silas whispered. I didn't think the little country mouse had claws. But be careful, Duchess. You don't know who you've married. He leaned in closer. Ask him about the fire, Isolde. Ask him why the nursery door at Blackwood was locked from the outside when the house burned down. Ask him why he was the only one who made it. Out. Silas straightened up, smirked at Sebastian, and strode out of the room. The front door slammed. Isolde stood frozen. The adrenaline crashed, leaving her cold. She looked at Sebastian. He wasn't celebrating the victory. He was staring into the fire, his face a mask of haunted misery. Sebastian, she whispered. Take the boy upstairs, he said, his voice dead. Sebastian, what did he mean? I said, take him upstairs. He swept a vase of white lilies off the mantelpiece. It shattered against the hearth, the sound exploding through the room. Leo gasped and ran to the door. Isolde followed, her heart breaking. She ushered Leo to Martha, then turned back to the drawing room, but the door was locked. She knocked. Sebastian, open this door. "Go away, Isolde," he shouted from inside. "Leave me alone." She listened as the sound of glass clinking against glass resumed. He was drinking to forget, and for the first time, Isolde was terrified of what he was trying to remember. For 3 days, the Duke did not emerge from his study. The house returned to a state of tension. The servants walked on eggshells. Isolde spent her time with Leo, trying to keep his spirits up, but her mind was consumed by Silas's words. Locked from the outside, it was impossible. Sebastian loved his nephew. He had saved him. But the scar on Sebastian's face, the shadows in his eyes. On the 4th morning, a gold-embossed invitation arrived. Isolde marched down to the study. She didn't knock. She used the master key she had bullied Barrow into giving her. Sebastian was sitting in a leather armchair, unshaven, staring at a portrait of a smiling man and woman, his brother and sister-in-law. "Get up," Isolde said, throwing the curtains open. The gray morning light hit him, and he winced. "I told you I did not want to be disturbed. I don't care what you want. I care about our survival." She threw the invitation onto his lap. "The Duchess of Richmond is hosting her winter ball in 2 days. Everyone will be there, including Silas." Sebastian picked up the card and tossed it into the cold fireplace. "I don't dance, and I don't parade myself for the vultures." "If we do not go," Isolde said, crossing her arms, "Silas will tell everyone you have locked yourself away in a fit of madness. He will say you are unfit. He will say, I am terrified of you. We have to show them, Sebastian. We have to show them we are strong." "We?" He looked at her, his eyes bloodshot. "Why are you still here, Isolde? You got your money. Your father is safe. Why do you stay in this tomb?" Isolde walked over and knelt before his chair. She took his rough, scarred hands in hers. "Because I made a vow," she said softly, "and because I think...
You are not the villain you pretend to be, but you have to prove it. Not to me, to yourself." Sebastian looked at her hands holding his. He let out a shuddering breath. "I cannot dance," he whispered. "My leg, it stiffens when it rains." "Then we will walk," she said. "We will walk in, heads high, and we will stare them down, together." The night of the Richmond ball was glittering and cruel. The ballroom was a sea of silks, diamonds, and gossip. When the footman announced, "The Duke and Duchess of Harrogate," the music literally stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned to the top of the staircase. Isolde wore a gown of ice-blue silk, threaded with silver, that shimmered like moonlight. Around her neck was the Harrogate sapphire, a gem the size of a pigeon's egg. She looked radiant, but it was the man beside her who drew the gasps. Sebastian was cleaned up. He wore severe black evening wear, the star of the garter pinned to his chest. His hair was tamed, his jaw clean-shaven. The scar was visible, stark and white, but he didn't hide it. He held his head high, his expression stony. Isolde squeezed his arm. "Breathe," she whispered. "I hate them," he muttered, barely moving his lips. "Every single one of them." "Look at me," she said. He turned his head, his gray eyes locked onto hers. "Just look at me," she repeated. "Ignore them." They descended the stairs. It felt like walking into a pit of vipers. As they reached the floor, the crowd parted. Whispers hissed like steam. "The Devil Duke bought a wife. Look at the scar. Murderer." Silas was there, holding court near the punch bowl. His smile faltered when he saw them. He hadn't expected Sebastian to show his face. The orchestra nervously struck up a waltz. "Dance with me," Isolde commanded softly. "Isolde, my leg, just sway with me, please." Sebastian hesitated, then placed his hand on her waist. It was warm and firm. He pulled her close, creating a fortress of two in the middle of the ballroom. They moved slowly. It wasn't a perfect waltz, but it was intimate.
Sebastian shielded her from the glares. She anchored him against the panic. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice rough. "Too beautiful for a beast like me." "You are not a beast, Sebastian," she said, looking up at him. "You are just a man who forgot how to live." For a moment, the room faded away. There was only the warmth of his hand, the scent of his cologne, and the undeniable pull between them. Isolde realized with a jolt of terror that it wasn't just a partnership anymore. She was falling in love with her husband, and looking at the raw hunger in his eyes, he was falling too. The music ended. There was polite, scattered applause. "Well done."
Voice sneered. They turned. Silas stood there, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "A touching performance," Silas said. "Truly, the loving couple." He offered a glass to Sebastian. "To family?" Sebastian stared at the glass. "I don't drink with liars." Silas laughed, stepping closer so only they could hear. "Speaking of lies, did you tell her yet, Sebastian? Did you tell her why the fire started? Did you tell her who knocked over the candle?" Sebastian went rigid, his face turned the color of ash. "Stop it," Sebastian warned. "It wasn't an accident, was it?" Silas grinned, his eyes gleaming with malice. "It was a fight between brothers. You and Arthur. You argued, you fought, and you killed him, didn't you? The fire was just the cover." "No," Sebastian choked out. "Everyone knows you loved Arthur's wife," Silas whispered, delivering the final blow. "You wanted her. You couldn't have her, so you burned them both." Sebastian let out a sound like a wounded animal. He shoved Silas hard. Silas stumbled back, spilling the champagne down his front. The ballroom gasped. "Sebastian!" Isolde grabbed his arm. "He's lying!" Sebastian shouted, looking around at the sea of judging faces. But in his eyes, Isolde saw guilt. Deep, ancient guilt. He pulled away from her. I have to go." "Sebastian, wait!" But he was already storming through the crowd, pushing people aside, fleeing the light, fleeing the accusations, fleeing her. Silas straightened his coat, brushing off the droplets. He looked at Isolde, who stood alone in the center of the room. "I told you, my dear," Silas said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "He is unstable, a danger to himself and others." Isolde looked at Silas, then at the retreating back of her husband. She didn't run after him. She turned to Silas, her face cold as ice. "You may have won this round, Silas," she said, her voice carrying through the silent room. "But the game is not over, and I am not a woman who loses." She turned and walked out, head high, leaving the scandal behind her. She had a husband to save and a mystery to solve. She was going to find out what really happened the night of the fire, even if it meant breaking Sebastian apart to find the truth. The carriage ride back to Harrogate House was a funeral procession for the living. Isolde sat in the dark, her mind racing. Sebastian had vanished into the night, but she knew where he would go. He wouldn't run, he would retreat to the scene of his torment. She found him in the library. He wasn't drinking, he was packing. "You should not have come back," Sebastian said, his voice a hollow ruin. He threw a ledger into an open trunk. "Silas has won, Isolde. By noon tomorrow, he will have the doctors here to commit me. Must take Leo and disappear before he gets the boy." "Running is an admission of guilt," Isolde said, slamming the trunk shut, "and you are not guilty." "You heard him! The door was locked!" Sebastian roared, the anguish tearing through him. "I tried to open it, but I failed them." "Think, Sebastian," Isolde grabbed his shoulders. "You told me the heat warped the frame, but a warped door jams tight, it doesn't rattle.
If it felt held, it wasn't the wood, it was a bolt. Sebastian froze. The memory washed over him, the handle turning but hitting resistance. "I need to see Leo's drawings," Isolde whispered. She ran upstairs, Sebastian close behind. They found Leo asleep, his sketchbook open. Isolde frantically flipped to the drawing of the garden fountain. There in the corner was the figure Leo had drawn weeks ago. It wasn't a guard. "Look!" Isolde pointed, her hand trembling. In the crude hand of a child, the dark figure standing outside a burning house held a distinct object, a large iron key, and on the figure's hand, a smudge of yellow chalk, a gold ring. "Silas!" Sebastian breathed. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Silas wasn't at his club. He was there. He locked them in. They woke the boy gently. When Sebastian knelt by the bed, stripped of his anger and defensiveness, Leo didn't recoil. "I know what you saw, Leo," Sebastian choked out. "I am sorry I was too weak to save them, but I swear to you, I will be strong enough to save you now." Leo looked at his uncle, then at the drawing. He gave a single solemn nod. The sun rose over a frosted London. At 10 o'clock, the heavy iron knocker slammed against the door. Silas St. Clair stood on the step, flanked by 2 constables and Dr. Arbuthnot. He looked triumphant. "We are here for the boy," Silas sneered as Barrow opened the door, "and to escort the Duke to Bedlam." "I am afraid that won't be necessary." Sebastian appeared at the top of the grand staircase, Isolde at his side. He wore his full ducal regalia, looking not like a madman, but like a king. "The papers are signed, Sebastian," Silas called out, stepping into the foyer. "Don't make this difficult." "I am not mad, Silas," Sebastian said, his voice echoing off the marble. "I was merely blind, but my eyes are open now." "Arrest him!" Silas barked at the constables. "Wait," Isolde commanded. "We have a witness." Martha, the maid, stepped out from the shadows of the gallery, holding Leo's hand. The boy walked down the stairs, his small legs shaking, but his chin high. He stopped a few feet from Silas. "Leo," Silas cooed, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "Come to Uncle Silas." "No." The word was small, rusty, but clear. The silence in the hall was deafening. "I saw you," Leo said, pointing a finger at the man who had haunted his dreams. "You locked the door. You had the key." Silas's face drained of color. "He's lying. The boy is an idiot." "He is the heir," Sebastian thundered, descending the stairs, "and he just identified his parents' murderer." "It was an accident," Silas screamed, backing away as the constables turned toward him. "I only meant to scare them. I didn't know the fire would move so fast." The confession hung in the air, sharp and irreversible. Sebastian lunged. He pinned Silas against the wall, his forearm against his cousin's throat. For a terrifying second, Isolde thought he would kill him. "Sebastian, no!" she cried. "He isn't worth your soul!" Sebastian looked at Isolde, then at Leo. He released his grip, letting Silas slide to the floor, gasping. "Take him," Sebastian ordered the stunned constables. "Get him out of my sight." As Silas was dragged away, shouting obscenities, the house felt instantly lighter. The shadows that had plagued Harrogate House for 2 years vanished. Sebastian turned to Isolde and Leo, pulling them both into an embrace that finally felt like home. 1 year later, the library at Wingham Hall was no longer a place of desperation. It was filled with the warmth of a roaring fire and the soft cooing of a baby. Isolde sat in the armchair, holding her 3-week-old daughter, Victoria. The door opened, bringing in a gust of snowy air and a laughing Sebastian. He was chasing Leo, who was now a boisterous 8-year-old, brandishing a wooden sword. Sebastian stopped, pulling off his gloves to touch the baby's cheek. The scar on his face remained, but the darkness behind his eyes was gone, replaced by a deep, abiding peace. "I was thinking," he said softly, sitting on the arm of her chair, "about the night we met." Isolde smiled. "The night I made a terrible joke?" "The night you made a wish," he corrected, kissing her hand where the heavy gold ring now sat perfectly. "I walked through that door a dead man. You brought me back to life." "I'd marry the first man who enters," Isolde whispered, echoing the words that started it all. "And I thank God every day that it was you." And that is the story of how a desperate joke turned into a love story that saved a dynasty. Isolde and Sebastian proved that sometimes the scariest choice is the right one. I hope you enjoyed this historical romance drama. If you did, please give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps the channel. Let me know in the comments, would you have had the courage to marry the Duke of Devils? Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you never miss a story. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next chapter.